teachings of Rabbi Ephraim Sprecher, Dean of Students at Diaspora Yeshiva on Mount Zion, Jerusalem.
On Shabbat, Shabbos Chalamot Pesach, we read a chapter of the book of Yecheskel, chapter 37, which deals with an incredible episode where Ezekiel, revives 200,000 dead, dry skeleton bones. Why did we read that on Pesach, and who are these 200,000 dead skeletons that Yecheskel revived? And did he actually do it, or is it only a parable? Stay tuned. The Haftorah that we read Shabbos Chalamot is the story of Yecheskel's revival of the dry bones that lay lifeless in a valley. Now, there's one opinion in the Talmud in Sanhedrin 92 that this was a prophetic vision, but others say it actually took place. And we know when two Tanoim disagree, Elu v'Elu divrei Elohim chayim. So how can we reconcile the two opinions in the Talmud Sanhedrin 92b, or whether the vision of the dead, dry bones of Ezekiel, whether it actually happened or whether it was a parable, how they both right, and why did we read this on Pesach? Who were these dead, dry bones that Yecheskel resurrected? The Talmud Sanhedrin 92 tells us that these were the bones of the 200,000 members of the tribe of Ephraim who left Egypt prematurely under the leadership of a false Mashiach. They were massacred by the Palestinians, by the Plishtim, as we find in Chronicles Divrei Hayamim. Thus, their resurrection was a culmination of the Pesach Exodus. Their exodus was a failed exodus. They left 30 years too early before the time, and they were killed by the Plishtim. And therefore, it was a failed exodus. So therefore, during the real exodus, we read the chapter of their failed exodus when they left 30 years early before the time. Another reason why we read the resurrection of the dead on Pesach, Rabbi Goen tells us that the resurrection of the dead in the Messianic era will take place on Pesach. So that this early occurrence of the same miracle through Yecheskel, chapter 37, is inappropriate for the festival of Pesach, because Pesach, according to Rabbi Goen, the dead will be resurrected, and therefore 2,500 years ago we had a taste of that when the Yecheskel resurrected 200,000 members of the massacred tribe of Ephraim. Now, the reason God performed this miracle through Yecheskel was to give strength and encouragement to Israel. We have a bitter exile, destruction of the temple, we're suffering with corona. It looks like it's all over. By seeing how these dead, dry bones came back to life, we would realize that we too should not lose up hope, that eventually we will be redeemed from this corona, this terrible virus. And as we know that the word Mashiach in Hebrew is Gematria Corona. And as we read on Shabbos Hagadol, this past Shabbos, Malachi says that right before God sends Mashiach, through Eliyahu Nabi's announcement, God says, I will smite the earth with a plague. At the end of Malachi, the very last verse, in the very last prophet Malachi, he says, behold, God says, I send Eliyahu Nabi before the great and awesome day of God. But right before that, God says, I will come and smite the earth with a plague. Isn't that incredible? That's how Malachi ends 2,400 years ago. So it's all part of the script. Don't despair, hang in there. Who were these dry bones? Reality or a parable? Who were they, or were they at all? As we said, that there are two opinions in Talmud Sanhedrin 92. Some say it's only a mashal, it's only a parable. But the other rabbi says, no, it happened. The proof is that I am a descendant of these dead bones that were revived by Ezekiel. And he says, the tefillin that I have is a hand-me-down from my ancestors who were resurrected in that valley by Yecheskel, and therefore it wasn't a vision, a parable. It actually happened, and the proof is in the tefillin, not in the pudding. I have the tefillin from my ancestors hand me down. Now again, we said when two rabbis disagree, is it a vision, or did it actually happen? And both opinions have to be validated. Did it happen really, or only in the prophet's mind's eye? Is the prophet Yecheskel transported to the valley physically, or was it a prophetic trance or a vision? The Rambam holds it was only a vision. He follows that opinion. It's only a prophetic vision. This whole episode, the revival of the dead bones, took place inside the prophet's mind. And the Rambam follows his shita throughout Tanakh, that whenever angels or God interact with a human being, it can only take place in prophetic vision, dream, or trance. The Rambam's opinion is that the three angels came to Abraham. It was all a dream or a trance. When he ran to fetch them water, he ran to get them meat and bread, tongue sandwiches on rye. The Rambam says it was only a vision by Abraham. It only took place inside Abraham's head. That's one of the reasons why the Rambam was so controversial. And one of the reasons why his guide to perplex was banned, because he says whenever Tanakh tells us that a Navi, even Abraham, the only exception is Moses, but all the other prophets, when they interact with God or with a Navi, it only takes place in a prophetic vision, trance, or a dream. So the Rambam says here too, Yecheskel also. He was told by God to lie on his side for 390 days. Very bizarre. And then another 40 days. Was God torturing him? So the Rambam says it's only a vision. In reality, he didn't resurrect any dead bones. He didn't really lie on his side for 390 days. God did not torture him. It all took place in a vision, trance, or a dream. Now, according to the opinion that this was actual physical resurrection, what happened to them? So the Talmud Yerushalmi says that they stood up, they sang Shira, and they made Aliyah, and they gave birth to children and grandchildren. Now, how do we validate both opinions? Who's right? Is the Rambam's opinion right? There was only a trance, a vision, or a dream? Or is the other rabbis right? In Sanhedrin 92, that it actually took place? They're both right, because this valley of the dead bones resurrection is referring to our time. We, at the post-Holocaust, my parents were Holocaust survivors, we are the resurrected dead dry bones. Some Holocaust survivors remarried, rebuilt their lives despite losing family with children. They remarried, raised a family again, became parents and grandparents again, and they handed down their tefillin. That tefillin symbolizes their legacy to their offspring, rebuilt their lives. Other Holocaust survivors were not able to do that. Their survival was not real for them. They couldn't believe that they survived. They felt guilty that they survived when their beloved relatives were murdered. Others, their survival was not real for them. It was only a parable. They couldn't start over. They gave up. They gave up their revival. And for them, their survival on the Holocaust was only a parable. So we see that the Rambam and the other opinion are both valid. When the Rambam speaks about a vision, a parable, a dream, he's speaking about our time. The Holocaust survivors who just couldn't, after losing their family, their lives were destroyed, they couldn't start over. For them, their survival, their resurrection from the Auschwitz, from Treblinka, for them was only a parable. They gave up. Others, for them it was real. Their revival, their survival from Treblinka and Auschwitz was real, so real that they remarried, raised beautiful families again, starting over. became parents and grandparents, and were able to hand down their legacy, which is symbolized by the tefillin, down through their descendants. So we see when two rabbis in the Talmud disagree, we see how both of them, both opinions, are valid. They're speaking about different strokes for different folks. So there is no contradiction. There is no contradiction. Now, if you look at Yecheskel 37, that we're going to read on Shabbos Chalamot, it's just amazing if you look into it, how it speaks about our time. We are the resurrected dry bones. It's Ezekiel 37, verses 1 to 14. And he says something amazing. Thus says the Lord, behold my people, I will open up your graves and cause you to come out of your graves and bring you to the land of Israel. And again he says, you shall know that I am Hashem when I opened up your graves, O my people, and have brought you up out of your graves. And you shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Why does he keep saying graves again? These Jewish survivors from the Holocaust who came out of walking, living skeletons. They came out of the graves of Treblinka and Auschwitz, and they came to Eretz Yisrael. So these people actually were predicted 2,500 years ago by Prophet Yecheskel. Pesach is the holiday of renewal and rejuvenation. How else can a people, after losing 6 million of our people, broken, destroyed, 3 years later, we rise out of the graves of Auschwitz like a phoenix from the ashes of Auschwitz and come to this wonderful country 3 years after the Holocaust and build this wonderful country, startup nation, the leader in a high-tech, low-tech, you name it, Israel is the world leader. That's Yecheskel's prophecy that we read on Pesach. Pesach is the yontiv of rejuvenation, of renewal. And Yecheskel says, we got through Auschwitz, we're going to get through the corona as well. We have to trust Hashem. We have to trust Hashem that this is just a prelude for the Messianic era. Hashem is getting us ready. There's an amazing Zohar, but the Zohar tells us that just like the first redemption of Egypt was brought about by plagues, and it says no one should leave their house, and then the redemption from Egypt came. So the Zohar says it's a final redemption as well. We were brought about by plagues, and no one should leave their homes. Isn't that amazing? The Zohar 2,000 years ago said that the final redemption will follow the roadmap of the first redemption from Egypt, plagues, and no one should leave their homes, Exodus 14. Final redemption, says the Zohar, will also be through plagues, and no one will be able to leave their homes. So this gives us strength and courage to read this prophecy. We are the valley of the dry bones, resurrected, rejuvenated, the wonderful state of Israel. Our parents were living skeletons. Hashem opened up the graves for them, and they came back to build this wonderful country. The Jews, when we left Egypt, we were memtesh sharei tumah, and God revived us. So this koach of Pesach, the koach of renewal and rejuvenation, just like we were able to get by Hitler and Arafat and Abu Mamza, we will also defeat this terrible coronavirus. The word corona comes from the word crown or coronate. Kodesh Baruch Hu is saying, you remember me? You worship high-tech. You worship your computer. God says, I have a little tiny creature that you can't even see with the eye that's shaped like a crown. God says, remember whom the crown belongs to. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, don't forget me. Let's get back to basics. Pesach, matzah, and moror. Pesach symbolizes freedom. Matzah, freedom. Moror is bitterness. it's all mixed together. Hillel said you have to eat Pesach, Matzah, and Maror together to teach that life is a combination of the good, Pesach Matzah, and also the better. You can't have one without the other. In every life, there has to be Maror. And the Maror, the bitterness in life, will lead to salvation of Pesach and Matzah. So we have to take the good with the better. Life is like a cup of coffee. You have the hot water, you have the cold milk, you have the bitter coffee, and you have the sweet sugar, and you have to stir it together. You can't have one without the other. That's life. We are now in the Chevle Leida Shel Mashiach. The Zohar told us 2,000 years ago that before Mashiach comes, there'll be terrible suffering. It's not a punishment. The greatest joy in life is the birth of a child. How does the mother know that her birth is due? The greater the labor pains of the mother, the closer is the birth. So the more the pain of the mother increases in her labor pains, then she knows that the birth of the child is coming. It's the same thing with the Messianic era. The greater the labor pains of Corona and the suffering, that we know that the birth of the Mashiach is very close. It's not a punishment. It's the way God set up the world. Couldn't a lady have a baby, the great bundle of joy, without pain? No pain, no gain. The more severe the labor pains of the mother is, the closer is the birth. Says the Zohar, the same thing with our labor pains of giving birth to the Mashiach. The greater the pain, the more the suffering, we know that the birth of Mashiach is close. And the main thing is not to despair, hang in there. Chag kosher v'sameach. Thank you.
For more of Rabbi Sprecher's teachings, visit rabbisprecher.com.